Betty Boop and the Little King is a Fleischer Studios cartoon from 1936. This is directed by Dave Fleischer and Myron Waldman. It's written by Soglow, and we have a voice cast including Jack Mercer and Mae Questel. And Soglow actually created the character of the Little King, and I'll talk very briefly about the Little King first of all because I was kind of fascinated by this because I have seen some Van Buren Little King cartoons. They produced the bulk of the cartoons based on the comic strip character, but for some reason, and I don't know why, Fleischer Studios produced this one with Betty Boop. So it was kind of interesting to see a character normally from Van Buren Studios being produced by Fleischer. However, for me, that's where the fascination ends. Because the cartoon itself is not very good. The narrative could have been interesting if they'd maybe taken a different approach, but I actually found it to be very boring. The Little King is watching a theatrical performance. He's very, very bored, so he decides to leave without anybody seeing him, and he happens to see a poster for Betty Boop's show, and he goes to see her performance instead, which is a very different, much more lively production, and I won't say exactly what happens, but he becomes involved in it. And honestly, the pacing wasn't great. The actual action wasn't interesting. The animation is fine. It's not brilliant. It's not the most engaging, but it's okay. Betty Boop was really boring in this one, and honestly, so was the Little King. The only thing I like is the animation of the Little King. I do like the design of the character, so that was interesting. But honestly, the rest of it, very boring. For me, it just felt like more of a novelty to see this character that I usually watch from a different studio entering the world of Betty Boop. That in itself, yeah, it was fascinating. But the execution of the story, in fact, just the story in general, wasn't that great. The pacing wasn't great. The animation is really boring. And Betty Boop could have been any character. I didn't really feel like we got the best of Betty Boop. It was definitely more about the Little King. But as a character in this, he really wasn't interesting either. So, needless to say, I didn't think Betty Boop and the Little King was very good. Yes, fascinating because of the character of the Little King, but as a story, as an animation, honestly, not very impressed at all. If you've seen some Little King and you haven't seen this, I'd say check it out. If you are a fan of Betty Boop and you've never seen any of the Little King, I'd say check some out. Definitely worth having a look at. But in general, as a cartoon, Betty Boop and the Little King wasn't very good at all.